Hello and welcome to Help Heroes' first ever Hot Topics webinar. My name is Hannah Lawton and I'm the Sports Recovery Manager at Help for Heroes. If you're an audience member this evening, just so you're aware, your video and microphone has automatically been switched off, and also make you aware we are recording this webinar so that we can send it out to those at a later date who weren't able to attend this evening. Some of you may know Help for Heroes recently launched a weekly social ride on Zwift as a way of creating an online community, and our two presenters this evening have been instrumental in helping us set that up. Our presenters will be showing you their personal setups in their home environment, so please do bear with us. We will try and make it as smooth as possible, but we will be walking around houses to try and show you that. If you have any questions as we go through, then please do type them into the Q&A box, which should be on your screen. We'll have a Q&A section towards the end of the webinar, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of your questions, if not all of your questions, as we go through. Andy Perrin and Andy Shuttleworth will be your presenters this evening. They're both veterans and they've both been using Zwift as a recovery tool. So without further ado, let's get started. Andy Perrin, over to you.
Hello, my name's Andy Perrin. I'm a former sergeant in the Royal Signals. I was medically discharged in 2011 and have been pretty much involved with Health Heroes since then, and obviously mainly on the sports recovery side. My Health Heroes history, I'm really fortunate to be involved in lots of really good activities and fun things I've really enjoyed over the years. I've done the Race Across America, and I've also done a couple of Invictus Games in the early Invictus Games. And I'm also now a Help for Heroes ambassador. I've been pretty much done Zwift from the beginning. So when it was actually known as sort of a beta test, I signed up for it, and I've seen it evolve massively over the last few years, and specifically during this COVID period, it's been, exponentially increased in the amount of use, because obviously people have realised its potential in the situation we're in. For me, it was when I used to race a lot more than I do now. In the early years, I used to use Zwift mostly for winter training, but now it's just become a really good thing to do as a social family activity, and I use it all year round. I'm going to hand over to Andy S, who's going to introduce himself before I tell you a little bit more about Zwift.
Hi, I'm Andy Shuttleworth, and I was a combat med technician in the Territorial Army, and I had a training accident back in 1981. Following surgery, I never fully recovered and had to leave the TA in the mid-1980s, and was told I'd need a new knee within 5 years. I then developed spinal problems and finished up on spinal traction in the Princess Alexandra Hospital at RAF Rawton. As a scientist in civil life and CBRNE specialist, I spent my career working for the MOD and the Foreign Office, and deployed alongside the military in Northern Ireland and during both Gulf Wars, and spent time in between the wars in Iraq as an UNSCOM inspector. In 2017, more than 35 years after my original accident, I literally had a screw loose and my knee finally failed, and I was back in surgery, at which point I was picked up by Help for Heroes. Not only have they helped me with my physical recovery, they've helped me to come to terms with the mental legacy of 2 Iraq wars. 2 screws loose then. During my recovery, I discovered that I kept falling off my mountain bike. No balance and don't know where my lower legs are. And some fool at Help for Heroes told me to try a trike, and I've never really looked back. I started with no intention of riding with anyone else, and yet within weeks, Help for Heroes had got me racing. I was hooked. I tried out unsuccessfully for the Invictus Games in 2019 and attended the trials in Sheffield, which were the high spot of my 2019. I still get a silly grin whenever I think about it. When lockdown started, I just returned from a training camp and was waiting to see if I'd been selected for the Warrior Games. I'm the newbie to Zwift. Back in April, I was persuaded to try Zwift by John Knott, another Help for Heroes beneficiary. To be honest, I thought he was mad. I was highly sceptical at first, and I took quite a bit of convincing. Once I tried it though, it quickly became apparent what a brilliant resource it actually is. Not just during lockdown, but also during the off season and at any other time when you don't really feel like going out on the road. I got introduced to weekly Invictus Foundation rides, and I competed in time trials and crit races. I've ridden with whiz riders from every nation under the sun. And last weekend, Andy Perrin and others talked me into doing the virtual Prudential Ride London. Let's say that riding up and down Box Hill time after time for hours on end could be soul destroying on your own, but done with friends on Zwift, it was no less painful, but at least it was a laugh. It must have been, as I was out with Andy Perrin the very next day. Now, back to Andy.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, back to me. So basically, we're going to try between the two of us, or the three of us here. We just wanted to show. We're really trying to advertise Zwift as something that could be something that you may be interested in. So we're going to try and help you out there. So tell you a little bit about it. Tell you how we set it up for various different bikes and turbos and all that sort of thing. How we use it, what we use it for, and where you can join us and get the best out of it. So Zwift, like Hannah said, this is my house, so it's like welcome to my Zwift crib. So I'm doing the best I can, but I'm going to give you a bit of a taster of everything. So Zwift is basically a virtual training platform for cycling and now running, and I'm not sure of the date when it's going to become live, but also potentially rowing as an official thing. You can ride socially, so just with friends. So if I knew this chap here called Timothy, I could click on his name and just go for a friendly spin with Timothy. No idea who he is. I can also just do, if I am so inclined, I can do some training. So I can go structured training rides. There is just literally endless possibilities to what you can do. It's an amazing resource. You can race on it, train on it, and just go social riding on it. So I'm going to show you some setups. So this is like where we get to wander around my house and see a few setups. As I said, I've done Zwift for quite a few years now, years before that as well. So I've got quite a few sort of training tools, and I've managed to keep hold of them. And so I've sort of got a historical training process that I've used, and it works really well with Zwift. So welcome to my other room. I'm going to show you some Zwift setups at the moment. It's not the best, obviously, best camera views, and any questions you may have, please just put them in and I will try and sort of highlight anything as well. So we're going to try and break it down a little bit. Well, I'm going to break down in terms of the uprights, some different types of packages you can use on Zwift. I would call this the basic package. It's sort of, you can take that in terms of cost and also just sort of level as well. I have here a Tax Turbo. I believe, I'm not even sure what brand this one is, but it's a basic Tax Turbo. It's what I would call a dumb trainer. It doesn't have sort of any electrical, it's not plugged into the mains, it doesn't really have a brain, and this just runs off contact with the rear wheel of the bike. You can control the amount of resistance through just a simple cable that has a series of levels on it. To use this one on Zwift, you need to obviously connect. The Zwift essentially needs data to run, and using its sort of algorithms and all that sort of stuff, it can translate what you're doing into something virtual. Okay, so with a dumb trainer, you are going to need Zwift is going to need some data. If we start at the beginning, it's probably the easiest way. So the Zwift is going to need your speed. So you can get something. You'll see this in a video shortly, but it looks a little bit like this. This is a cadence sensor, but the speed sensor is very similar. A speed sensor will basically just fit on a bracket on your rear wheel hub and spin round, and it will obviously calculate your speed. You also need a cadence sensor, which is this one here, and that will fit on your crank arm, probably on the inside, otherwise you can hit your feet on it all the time, and that will take your cadence of your pedaling. You also probably need to use a heart rate monitor, which is quite an important part of it as well. All this on here, so a heart rate monitor around about 30 to 50 pounds, a set of sensors, speed and cadence. They generally come with fairly good computers, bike computers, but they're again around 40, 50 quid. Once you've got those three, you basically can connect into Zwift. Now Zwift will, obviously when you go for a ride on Zwift, you can do, let's just say you can go and ride the Champs-Élysées in France. With a dumb trainer, it won't change your resistance based on the terrain you're riding on. So if you're going up the Champs-Élysées on the hill, nothing will change. You have to manually change the resistance, which is not quite as fun as the setups I'll show you in a minute, but this will get you on the road. So we have a trainer here. You can pick these trainers up for less than 50 quid second hand now, probably £100 for this one when it was new. So 100 quid, any old bike will do pretty much, as long as you've got a proper skewer that Andy will show you in his video, and a few basic sensors. That is the basic package for Zwift that I can show you. I'm going to take you to sort of like a middle ground one now. So we're back in my pain cave, as it were. And this is my TT bike, basically the bike in the other room. That's my daughter's bike, and we'll talk a little bit about family stuff later, but she does love a bit of Zwift, and she's only 9, but we'll get into that later. So this is my TT bike. I don't get to ride it anymore, my wife does. And this is what I would call the middle ground. So on here we have a turbo, which very similar looking to the one in the other room, but this is actually a smart turbo. So it's a Tax Vortex Smart. They sort of varying at the moment because turbos were in high demand, but around about 250, 350 quid for one of these. Again, it's same principle as the one next door. It runs on a rear wheel, and it basically involves the rear wheel touching a roller in the back of the machine there, and that generates the sort of the contact. The difference between here, the one next door, the dumb trainer and the smart trainer, this one is connected into the main, so it has essentially a computer in it. And what it will do is you can connect this to Zwift, and if you start climbing a hill, for example, in Zwift, it will put more resistance on. If you start going down a hill, it'll take the resistance off. So it has the feel of a real ride, as it were. So with this turbo, you don't necessarily need a speed sensor because it can work that off the turbo, but I prefer to keep a speed sensor in there. So there is a speed sensor on the rear hub. I have a cadence sensor on here as well. Now what this smart turbo does as well is, being that it can pick up your resistance, as it were, it actually has a sort of inbuilt power meter, and a power meter is a really useful training tool as well. So, and it's a big part of Zwift. These particular turbos are not particularly reliable because obviously there is a lot of margin for error, because you're basically it's sort of calculating your power off the contact with a tire and a sort of steel roller in there, and it's not the most accurate. What you can do is you can include a power meter on your bike, so Zwift can pick up your power meter, and that is another option for Zwift, and it makes it a bit more accurate and a bit more realistic, as it were. So on this TT bike, I've got Garmin Vector pedals. This is a single side one, so there's only a power sensor in one of the pedals, and basically what it does is it just sort of works out, it basically doubles what you put out of one leg to sort of give you the overall picture. Power meters, I'm a big fan of the ones on pedals, but they can be fitted into a crank or into the actual front chain set. But generally, if we're looking at costs of this setup for power meters, a single-sided power meter is normally about £500 thereabout. There's lots of different brands, and you might get discounts and bargains and such like. For a sort of really good dual-sided power meter, you're looking at about £1,000. So this is probably the best setup for Zwift, in my opinion. I think to get the best out of Zwift, a smart trainer is pretty useful, because you do get the benefit of the trainer reacts to the terrain that you're riding on, and it just gives that nicer feel. So we're looking at about, say, a £300 smart trainer, and the smaller sensors that go with it. So you need a cadence, a speed sensor, and a heart rate monitor. If you wanted to increase your training or be a bit more accurate with the power that your Zwift is displaying, the power you're putting out, then you'll need to add the pedals, but that is not essential. So that is like the medium setup, really. Again, any bike can go on that one as well. This is my latest setup, which is, I'd say, probably your higher end setup. It's more higher end just for, I'd say, accuracy as well of your training. But again, and it's also just a better ride on the trainer. So this is called a direct drive turbo. There are a couple of different brands you can get, and one's the best thing to do really is just Google reviews and see what you fancy. But this is a Wahoo kicker. You can also get a Tax Neo, which is a good one as well. You're looking at it for a really good one with quite an accurate power reading. You're looking at about £1,000 for one of these turbos. You can go down to about 500 or 600 pounds, so one that's not quite as accurate. Okay, the difference here is obviously you take the rear wheel out the bike, and the bike is attached to the so the bike has already has a skewer in your turbo, so you just attach your bike to the skewer, put your chain around the cassette that is already fixed to the turbo, and away you go. It's a lot quieter, is a lot more reliable, and is a lot more accurate. With this one, you don't need a power meter because the turbo is pretty accurate. I think they're talking now plus or minus 1% accuracy, but again, you can still use your own power meter if you've got one. If you have, I would say use it, because generally ones fitted to your bike are more accurate. Again, you'll need a heart rate strap as well on that one. And that is my 3 setups really. You can use any of them work really well. If you're just sort of introing, my advice to start with is maybe just borrow, if you can get hold of a cheaper turbo, or borrow one just to try one out and see what it's like, and you'll probably soon, like me, get a bit excited about it and just try and then look for the next best thing. Okay, but that is the 3 turbos that I have in my house. I do have 3 running at the same time sometimes because my whole family's involved in Zwift now. So it's a really good thing. We'll talk about that later. So I'm going to hand you over to Andy, who's going to show you his setup for a trike and also talk you through one of the apps that's involved.
Thanks, Andy. Before I start, it's probably worth saying we've thrown lots of prices at you, and we may throw some more prices at you. We do have a sheet that we can send out to people with some of these on. I've seen various videos which suggest you can get online with Zwift for anywhere between £30 up to £3,000 and more, depending on your setup and depending on what bits of kit you've already got. But let me show you what I've got here for a trike. So, welcome to my cave of pain. Here are a few trike setups we've got. Obviously, the first thing you need is a trike. This is my Ice Adventure. Other trikes will do, and of course you have hand cycles which fit in the same category. You'll notice my trike is up on wedges, so it's nice and level when I ride. Now, many of you will already have a bike computer, and if you have, you hopefully have Bluetooth sensors for it. Whatever you do, don't switch on your bike computer when you're Zwifting, or else it will grab the Bluetooth signals that Zwift needs. In fact, Bluetooth can be a bit of a problem. It's grabbed by anything and everything, including your phone and other things around the house. As I say, you may already have sensors, and this is a Wahoo speed sensor. You can get a speed and cadence sensor for about 50 quid. It's flashing because I've been spinning the rear wheel, so it's working. Here's the cadence sensor on the pedal and just counts the number of revolutions. So, trike is leveled on wedges, so you're not pointing up or pointing down when you're riding, and obviously mounted on a turbo at the back. Let me show you a couple of turbo setups that I've used. If you've got those sensors, you can use a dumb turbo like this one. Here's the skewer that holds the trike into the turbo, and you'll see the roller on which the trike sits. And the trike is held on the turbo simply by its own weight. So there's nothing to fix other than the skewer. You must use the skewer that comes with the turbo. Most of the ones that are on bikes have aluminium components and can break. So here's a smart turbo. It's a Saris M2. It has a cooling fan, a steel roller, and an electronics package. Your bike or trike is held into the turbo frame by the yellow torquing knob there, and that adjusts the pressure of the turbo against the wheel. It's smart because it talks to Zwift and automatically varies the resistance to match hills up to about a 15% gradient. And here you can see the skewer holding things into place. The turbo comes with a smart app that helps you set it up, calibrate it, and ride it at a fixed power. To calibrate, all you have to do is pedal like mad for 20 seconds, then freewheel to a stop. Hand cycles. That was recumbent trikes. Now we look at hand cycles. This is my friend Claire, and you'll see immediately there's a problem for some riders in that their legs are exactly where you would want to mount the turbo. But there is an alternative, and that's rollers. The front wheel simply sits between two rollers, and here we have it set up on a dumb roller machine. These cost about 250 to 350 quid. Smart ones are available, but at the moment they're few and far between and cost an arm and a leg. There is a compromise, and the compromise here is to mount the turbo, remove the leg mounts, and just dangle your legs in front of the turbo. This is like Grant here. Obviously it's not ideal because you are sitting in a position that you wouldn't normally sit in to ride your trike. Okay, you've got your turbo set up, you're ready to go. We've mentioned Bluetooth already. There's a second type of signal that you can send, and that's an ANT plus signal. If you're having problems with Bluetooth, ANT may be a solution, especially if you're using a computer. So you plug in an ANT dongle and you have an extension cable that sits very close to your trike or bike and carries the signal into your computer. As I said before, Bluetooth is a bit fussy and ANT is promiscuous and will pair with anything. So here's the one I use, and it feeds into my laptop. Here I'm running Zwift on the laptop, but it can also be set up on Apple TVs, some tablets and some smartphones. Android devices are the ones that might have problems. You switch on, and the first time you use Zwift, you have to enter the username and password for your Zwift account, and after that the program will load automatically. My laptop screen is tiny and I'm short-sighted, so I port the signal to an old TV. Bigger is better when it comes to an immersive virtual experience, as you'll see when we go back to Andy P's setup. Zwift logs in, and the first thing it does to check that all the sensors are working. Right, here you can see we've got power source top left, my heart rate monitor on the left, cadence in the middle, and controllable. That's the ability to control how your turbo is working on the right. And you can see that the Saris and is controlling the controllable and the power source, and my cadence sensor for some reason here is controlling the cadence. However, the turbo will control that as well. The heart rate is vital to get real power output. Now, the most important thing you can do the first time you ride, and in fact every time you ride if it's a wheels-on turbo, is to calibrate your device once again. And here it's very small. You've got to click on this little spanner symbol on a computer screen. You might see later as we look at an iPad, this little symbol is much harder. But again, you have to pedal like crazy up to about 37 kilometers per hour and then let the turbo coast to a halt. And that will make sure your power output is as close to reality as it possibly can be. As I've said, you can put Zwift on phones or tablets, and they do like Apple phones, and a few Android ones. Of course, the screen is small, it's less immersive than a huge TV, but many people, including Andy P, do use Zwift on a tablet and find it works fine. Here on the iPhone, it works in a very similar way to the computer. It'll want me to enter my sensor details, but on this occasion, I'm just going to watch someone else quickly ride on Zwift. When you're riding on Zwift, you can go to the virtual worlds of Watopia or real routes in the UK, US, Germany, and France. So let me move ahead. We're loading Watopia in this case. And here we're watching a Mr. Rasmussen ride down the road. And you can get various views of someone riding. There are 8 different views. There's also a companion app which allows you to get so much more out of Zwift. And here it shows me signed up for a Help for Heroes meetup the following day, the Sand and Sequoias meeting. It also shows all the thousands of events I could join every day. And there really are thousands of them. Here's a Crit City race, a Zwift time trial. And here is an activity that I was involved in. This was a 6-week beginner FTP builder training course around Central Park in New York. I got a couple of personal records, so it was a good ride. And it shows you all the outputs from your power meter, cadence and heart rate, your power distribution and your heart rate distribution. It also shows other events. Now, Zwift lets me do virtually all the things I like to do with my Help for Heroes friends in the real world. I can train, I can race, I can poodle around the track and natter with my mates. We can do this whatever the weather, whatever country we're in, indeed wherever we are in the world, whatever time of day or night suits. You can do it as often or as little as you like. When you think we can only get half a dozen real world training opportunities in any normal year, Zwift can add to the level of contact and training. It's been a lifesaver during the COVID-19 lockdown, and I've ridden several times a week with friends from Help for Heroes, the Invictus Foundation, US Military Endurance Sports, and the World Team. Today, I'm hoping Andy P, Hannah and I can persuade you to come and have a play with us as we Zwift in our caves of pain. Back to Andy.
Right, just before I talk to you about the Discord app, so we're just going to stick with me for a minute. Yeah, so Andy just briefly mentioned how you set up with Apple. Now, I'm a big fan of the Apple setup. I run, because I've obviously got the family on it and sometimes we're on at the same time, using a phone is a great way of doing it. The way I set it up, so very quickly you can just see that I have either a phone or a iPad, and I just connect it through an adapter that turns it into HDMI, so it's lightning to HDMI with an extra power cable in there. And I can run that straight on a big TV, any TV I want, which is probably the most reliable one that I've ever used. I've used to use it on a laptop and it used to be a bit funny, but I really like my Apple. You can also use the Apple TV as well. I don't have much experience with that, but for about £150, I think an Apple TV is, they're a pretty good way of setting things up. But we're just going to quickly talk about the Discord app as well. So this is just another string to the bow, as it were, much like the companion is, the Zwift companion app. So the Discord app is a really good feature, a really good app for us. It allows us to communicate. So this is more, well, mostly for the social, but now you can obviously use this for races, and I'll give you an example of that one as well. But it looks just like it does on the screen, so hopefully you can see our little presentation there. So next to the companion, we've got our little Discord app symbol. When you click on that, it will take you in. And you basically can send people a link to various channels. So everything's broken down into channels. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we have a list of channels on this particular one. So we've got a Help for Heroes channel, an Invictus channel, and depending on where you are, what you're doing, who you're involved with, you can set up other channels as well. Within the channels, obviously you can invite people as well. That gives you like a link that you can send them through WhatsApp or wherever else. Or just write it on the screen, and it's sort of like a code basically. Within each channel you have a group chat. You can have as many group chats as you want, but you can see an example of one there. So that was from a Help for Heroes ride. So Hannah would set up the ride, give us a few things at the beginning just to point people out, pointing out what we're doing, and then basically you can have a chat. So if you're just wanting to, sometimes voice is a little bit tricky depending on what headphones you're using, or if you're open mic or something like that. So this is probably quite a nice reliable way, and you can even attach little documents or anything like that as well. So you have a chat feature on there. There is, I will say just briefly, a chat feature, a written group chat feature, a bit like a WhatsApp chat on Zwift itself as well, and we can show you that in a second. But also the voice chat, that's probably the best one. So when you switch to the voice chat, best things to do is to have a headphones. Now I use my phone for Discord, so I just connect in my Apple headphones, and I set it to touch to talk. So rather than have it on talk all the time, because otherwise everybody hears me sort of cussing and swearing and heavy breathing, and you don't really want that. So if you want to chat with someone, I do it push to talk. So when you hit the push to talk, you can obviously chat away, and it's a good way of doing it. An example of that is we had myself and Andy did the Ride London, like you said, 6-hour ride. It would have been a bit boring if I'd just sat in my room doing it for 6 hours on my own, but at least I can chat with people. And then people dropped in and out. So when people had finished their ride, they came back on. How you doing? Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm still going. Thanks. Cheers. And so you can. It's a great way. So you can. This is brings people out of that isolation situation of being in your own house. It is if you can go for a ride with all your mates. And the good thing about this is myself and Andy can be on different sides of the island, but if we're in a group ride together, or even we can still chat on Discord. It doesn't matter. It's not like you have to be right alongside someone in the real world to have a conversation with them. So we all get together and have a chat on the Discord app. So from the Discord chat, we're going to move into what we sort of discuss. It's a bit of a discussion between me and Andy, really, but this is like the benefits of Zwift. So hopefully Andy comes live for us. Are you there, Andy?
Yeah, I'm back.
Perfect. Right. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the benefits of Zwift. We cracked this out and we sort of made a list of things. But Andy, can you just sort of give us what is your sort of what you see as one of your most important benefits of Zwift?
Well, I think perhaps the biggest one is riding with other people. I was planning to do a whole series of training courses this year with Help for Heroes, and of course all that got knocked on the head with COVID. But having Zwift has enabled me to go on rides, to race, to train, all sorts of things that without it I could never have done. I could have perhaps got out a couple of times in the local neighbourhood, but I live on a busy A road. Riding on a trike can be quite exciting, especially with other traffic. So it's enabled me to do all the things I would have done, but a lot more besides.
Yeah, I think you're definitely talking about the social thing, and that's the community of it as well. So we have a Help for Heroes community, we have an Invictus community, and they all ride together and cross over. And I think this is the crazy thing. Like there's most of us on our Help for Heroes ride probably have never even met each other in the flesh, as it were. Myself and Andy certainly haven't, but we ride together all the time, probably at least twice a week now. And that is all done remotely, and that's just probably one of the benefits. Like I can cheer him on and help him along. He helps me on when we do the ride, and that's what it's like. And you chat about various different things. I hear a lot about biology. We get all the jokes. That keeps you going during an hour ride. But that's what it's like. You just have a good social ride. So like for example, when we do our Help for Heroes ride, it's good banter all the way through. And if your clock's ticking down and you look up and you go, oh, I've only got 10 minutes left. That's because you've had a good time talking and you haven't really thought about the effort you're putting into it, which probably leads on to the effort we put into it. So I think that is probably one of the good things about Zwift is the fitness element. Have you found it really beneficial to you doing the fitness side of it as a benefit?
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen is that there are a whole series of training courses. I think it's something like 3,500 different courses. I've just finished a 6-week FTP builder to improve my general fitness, and I've just started today another 12-week course.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of things. There are courses for everyone of every ability. So you can do beginners courses, you can do advanced courses.
Yeah.
You can either do them on your own or you can ride along with a friend. Now, I quite often ride with people who are based up in Yorkshire. I've got friends in Help for Heroes up in Scotland. You can set up a ride, you can do a training ride together. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the fitness thing's been a brilliant thing. Like actually in lockdown, since we've been in lockdown, obviously I'm still working, but I've managed to, without commuting and all that sort of things, I've actually been able to train more. When I used to use Zwift in the old days as a winter training tool, it was really useful, and that was because I didn't want to go out in the dark, because after work it's dark and it's dangerous and the roads aren't great, so I'd ride indoors and I'd be on my turbo because it's safer. One thing that we as well with the fitness, the real benefit as well is the time you have, because it just literally, you don't have to gear up with all your tools. As long as you've got a bottle of water, you can just walk upstairs and get straight on your turbo pretty much. These things don't take very long to set up. You can jump straight on. And I think we found that, and going back to the training plans, you can pick a training plan or a workout that lasts for as long as you want it to do. So my wife, she's a real big fan of the training plans. She's got her favorite already, and it's like a 34-minute one, and it's brilliant. So you can come upstairs. I'm going to do 34 minutes, this particular workout, and I'm done. Or I'll do another one, you know, and you can, if you fancy really smashing out, you can find a 2-hour one if you want to. You know, that side of it has just been brilliant. So like for me, fitness has been a really important one. I like to keep fit, and actually sweating away in your little pain cave is actually really useful. It's a really good tool for weight loss. So when we did the ride London, I worked out I lost 1.5 kilos in the 6-hour ride. So that's probably not a recommended tool from Sports Recovery or any nutritionist, but it did happen. So yeah, don't take that one as maybe a positive, but it did work. But it is, yeah, the fitness side of things is so good. Have you done much racing at all?
I've done a little bit, but before I go on to that, yeah. You reminded me of one vital bit of kit we'd forgotten about. In fact, two vital bits of kit. One is a towel to throw over the headstock if you're riding an upright bike.
Yeah.
To keep the sweat out of the headstock. Less of a problem on a trike, but also a fan. The bigger, the better. And for 35 to 50 quid, you can pick up a big gym-sized fan on Amazon, and they have been really, really vital over the summer.
Yeah,
you sweat so much more inside than you do outside.
Anything, all the kit we showed you, yeah, you can't do without the fan. Myself and my wife got one big fan in the corner, and we sort of fight over its positioning. So. And you do need it. And a good tip, that is a really important tip about putting a towel over your bike as well, is if you've got a nice bike, you will find that the sweat will destroy it. Okay, so handlebars, I've seen handlebars corrode and collapse because of being on a trainer. So do be aware that they do still need a regular wash down to get all the salt off and all that sort of thing. So do keep them covered. That's a really important one we never even thought about originally. But the racing,
racing. Yeah, I got dragged into racing through the Invictus Foundation, who did a special with US MES, Military Endurance Sports, back earlier in the summer, and I finished up doing a time trial. Now the nice thing is that you are put into groups based on your ability. So I'm a very slow trike rider, and you're a very, very fast upright rider. In the time trials, we don't race in the same group. We're split into groups based on our ability. So you can race against people who are of a similar standard, which is really, really great. It's the way the racing should be run.
Racing's amazing. Like I think we talked about this before. If this was a normal year and you were doing your normal thing, how many races would you have in a year compared to how many races you can do on Zwift, on a trike?
Yeah, I mean, last year I think I did, including the Invictus trials, probably 4 races.
Yeah.
I can do 4 a day, probably 40
exactly.
a day if I really pushed it.
The racing, the racing is amazing. So when you go on the companion app, you can search for obviously all the social rides, and the races as well. So just be aware that I would suggest at the start, if you're new to Zwift, jump straight into a D race. It's based on, they break down the race categories based on your watts per kilo. Even if you're an experienced rider, but this is your first time on Zwift, I would just jump in a D anyway, because it doesn't really matter, because you can soon guess where you are. And if you're just absolutely hammered the D group, then you just move yourself up. But there's something for everybody. There's TTs, there's crit races, there's normal sort of stage races. There's even hare and hounds, which is one of my favorites. So the D category would head off first, and they get given a sort of a 10-minute head start, and then all the other categories would go after them, and it's like a chase down, which is quite good fun. So there's loads of different types and styles of racing. There's women's racing as well. If you don't want to, obviously the ladies can race with the men as well, but they have their own specific racing. My daughter has done a few races. She's only 9. She races in some of the women's races, and that probably leads on, if that's all right, Andy, to the friends and family side of things.
Yeah,
it's been massively important to me, actually, that one. That's for real beneficial. I've got a 9-year-old. She does like cycling, but she's just, she watches me on Zwift and sees the screen, and she's like, oh, I fancy a go at this. So she has a bike, so I just put it straight on the turbo. Most children's bikes can go on as well. You might just have to look into it. It's a little bit tricky sometimes, but because she can go on it, and it's let's be honest, Zwift is a game as well. So the gamification of it is quite good for the kids. The kids love it. You level up, you win prizes. You can change your character. You can make them look good. You can do all sorts of different things, and she loves all that. And like for a 9-year-old to be on a trainer for an hour and 45 minutes because she wants to is just unreal. And then obviously my wife does it. She loves training packages and workouts, so she comes out and do those. I just do a bit of everything really. So I mean, and we also, like, obviously with the Healthy Hero side of things, it's not just about us, the beneficiaries, as well. It's all the friends and family. So like, if you see in the newsletters and that, friends and family can sign up. So my daughter does the Health Heroes rides.
Yeah, she beats me every week.
Your nemesis. Yeah, she loves it.
My nemesis.
And it caters for everything. I mean, it's she likes to you can follow people on Zwift. You can send them a virtual thumbs up. She receives them and thinks that's amazing. She likes to beat people as well, just like anybody. So I think the friends and family is a really useful thing. Is that, you agree?
Yeah, I think going forward, that's going to be really, really important, because we're always supported by the families whenever we're out riding for real. And this is a nice way that they can be participating in what we're doing. I think it's great. Yeah,
I mean, obviously it's like, I'm quite lucky to have got a couple of turbos, but I just switch them around. It doesn't take long, 5 minutes to take my wife's TT bike off and put my daughter's on the smart turbo. She's dying to have a go on the direct drive one as well, though. So I'm gonna have to share my turbo. I've had points in here where I haven't been able to go on the turbo because my wife and my daughter are both on, so I have to sit there and watch. So that's one thing you might want to be careful of if you introduce anybody in your friends and family. You might find you don't get a slot anymore. I think we talked about it briefly, but I found a benefit is safer training. So obviously indoors, the roads are getting pretty busy now. The roads are getting pretty bad in terms of condition. We're unfortunately moving into winter when the road nights are closing in and all that sort of stuff. So we have covered it, but it is a safe way to train. What do you reckon?
The other thing we should say is that you're not just limited to all the formal rides or formal training sessions. You can organise something called a meetup where you and your mates can get together and set up your own time for a ride. And bring in people as and when. And that's a really useful facility.
It's very time efficient, isn't it? You can just do it as and when you want. You're not restricted to anything really on there.
Or as you said earlier, if you see one of your friends actually riding, you can go and join them.
Yeah, that's a really cool thing. So I just set that up just now, actually, and I can. So if I just very quickly follow, I was actually following, for those of you who know who she is, I was just following on here Louise Minchin, the newsreader. Or is that newscaster? I'm not quite sure the right term. But she was just doing a TT ride on here just now. But I can just follow anybody and go and I can pick someone to go and ride with and see where they're riding and just join them. So quite often you get a notification on your Zwift companion that one of your friends, as it were, is going Zwifting. So I'm like, I'm going to go and jump on and just sort of surprise them and then go for a ride with them. So and it's just a great way of doing it. So Andy, do you think we've just about covered all the benefits and we just move on to some of the events that maybe people can get involved in?
Yeah. Do we need to mention price? We haven't mentioned how much Zwift actually cost.
Good point. Yeah, that's one thing. We did all that. Do you want me to do that one?
Yeah, I'll carry it. It's basically about $12.99 a month for one adult. But Andy P's got some good news if you've got kids.
Yeah, the best thing about a really good thing about Zwift is as long as you have an adult account, or one paying account. A child under 16, you might need to check if you've got more than one child. I'm not sure if it works, but any child under 16 can have their own account for free. So in my household, I have an account. Therefore, Jasmine, my daughter, she has her own free account, which is free all the way up to 16. But the issue at the moment is obviously everybody has to have their own account. So if you've got more people in your household as adults over 16, they'll need to pay a monthly subscription. But yeah, $12.99. I think that's probably a lot less than a gym membership, and you probably get more out of it as well. So I think benefits all good, covered most things. Should we move on to some sort of events that maybe anybody who's first timers might want to be involved in? How about do you want to talk about the social ride? That's a good one. You like that one?
Yeah, we've got a Help for Heroes social ride once a week. It's currently, well, in fact, the next one is tomorrow at what is it, 7 o'clock? 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and we are going to France.
Well, hey, that should be interesting. First time in France with Help for Heroes.
Yeah.
This is an interesting ride because there's something called an elastic band. So don't worry if you're the slowest thing on earth or the fastest thing on earth. The elastic band wraps around the whole group of riders, and providing everyone keeps pedaling, or you keep pedaling, you'll be kept with the group. You'll never drop more than 6 meters or so behind. So it's a nice way to ride together, even if you couldn't physically do it in the real world. So it's, for the slower riders, it's a bit of an encouragement.
Yeah, and the good thing about our ride on that one as well, the meetup ride we have, our Discord channel, the group chat is always live. So at any point in the week, you can just say, oh, is anybody doing it this week? Or Hannah, you need to remind you've got to organise one, or something like that. So the group chat is always live. So if you've got any problems, or you're saying, you know, like something's gone wrong with your turbo and you need a bit of advice on it. So the Discord app, having it on, being part of the Health Heroes channel is a good thing to have, because you'll get more information, and also people will be communicating during the week as well. Moving on to the next one on the list, we've got it's a really cool one. It's one I'm quite proud of, actually, because we've got the Invictus Games Foundation Sunday Social Ride. So we organise, so this is actually an official ride that falls every week, and then you'll find it on the events calendar on the companion app. It runs we run it, it's not a non-banded, so what Andy was just saying about everybody sticking together, that doesn't happen, unfortunately. But we do, I'm actually the ride leader, one of the ride leaders, and we try and keep people together. We run a sort of an average pace for an upright, really. So unfortunately, Andy sometimes struggles with the pace on that one. But the fact is, we have the Discord, we can still chat, and there's also other people on there. So it's not, a core group generally stick together, sometimes get some flyers, but also you get other people that form their own groups. And like I said, it is a social ride, so we change the routes, and we just have a bit of a chat, and that's at Sunday at 4:45 every weekend, and you'll find that on the events calendar. All you need to do, find the event, find it, and then just tick the box to say you're going, and it will say, do you want to stick a reminder, and you're good to go. And then when you join Zwift, you go for a ride, and it will come up on the screen with about sort of anywhere between 15 and 2 minutes to go. It will say, do you want to go to the ride, and off you go. And it's proving more and more popular. It's mostly veterans, but we do get veterans. It's open to everybody on Zwift, so we actually get a lot of anybody, women, men, children from all over the world join us on that ride. But we have a lovely group of veterans that are always on there, and we also have a Discord channel, and that one's always going as well. Other rides, so there's women's only rides, which we mentioned as well. So don't feel, a lot of ladies feel quite threatened when they have to go into men's races and all this sort of thing. And I know that's true in the real world, but there's women's only rides, often led by professional women cyclists as well, which is really cool. That's a really good thing to do. Tuesday evenings, the armed forces have a sort of racing schedule. I think they cater for everybody from A to D, so like high ability all the way down to sort of first timers, which is really good. We partnered up with US Military Endurance to sort out our Invictus ride, and because they're regulars and they've been doing this for a while, so they have about 3 rides a week. The best thing to do is just to look on the events page and find the events they do. Mostly social rides, but they can be a bit quicker than social rides, so it's up to you. World Team, Andy, that's one you put on there. Yeah,
World Team, it's an adaptive group for adaptive cyclists. They have rides a couple of times a week. One of them at a reasonable time, lunchtime, and I think it's on a Friday, and there are other rides on Wednesdays at almost midnight. So there are rides round the clock. That's the other point. You can find them whatever time of day suits you. And there are a couple of other things on here.
Sorry, Andy, I found on there a lot of time when you look at the events, you sort of ride one group ride, you're like, oh, that sounds good, and then you end up going weekly because it just suits you. So there's so many rides, like most of the ones on the bottom there, the ones Andy's found, that they just suit him, and it really works.
Yeah, the Swedish Zwift racing sub 2 watts per kilogram race, they're lovely. They're a really nice bunch of Swedes who I thought were Norwegian up until a week ago. They're lovely. They're great. Right. But the best place to find it, although you can find a lot of these things, all these things, in fact, on the Zwift Companion, there's a bit of another site called Zwift Hacks, all one word, which lays them out really nicely, and you can search the rides. You can search for different categories of ride, whether it's a woman's ride, whether it's a B, C, D category, what time of day it is. That's the quickest way of finding those rides. So that's Zwift Hacks.
What about, I think we're pretty much covered. What about Zwift Insider? Do we have some cool information on Zwift?
Yeah, Zwift Insider's really a blog for Zwift. It's got all sorts of useful hints and wrinkles. It tells you the best kit to buy, because would you believe it, if you change your bike on Zwift, or you change your tires, you can improve your times just as you could if you got better kit in the real world. And some of the new kits you can get simply by pedaling. Other things you have to endure real pain for. Andy Perrin rides this really smart Tron bike, but you've got to pedal up Everest to get it. And the sides.
Yeah, it took me a long time to do that one, but hopefully I earned it eventually.
But the Zwift Insider is the place to go just to see what's really going on in Zwift and how things are changing. We've mentioned cycling, but looking to the future, it's likely that rowing is going to be incorporated as well. Running already is, so there's something for everyone there. But we focus tonight just on the cycling.
Yeah, also just to add on to that one, actually, we didn't mention it before, but there's Facebook groups as well. And there's actually also, Zwift also runs Zwift Live, so they have live racing. So you might have seen over the last couple of months, due to the lockdown, a lot of the professionals were riding the virtual Tour de France, and that was actually live on the telly. But you can actually watch a lot of these live events on YouTube and the Facebook Live and all that as well. So there's a lot of information all over the place, really. But like you say, if you're a beneficiary, obviously just get involved with just Ask Sports Recovery for. You can email them for any sort of guidance as well. But also you can get in touch with us beneficiaries on the Discord group chat as well, and we'll that's why we're here. We want to help get more people involved because we've seen the benefits of it. Since we've been doing this, we've got beneficiaries that like riding their bike and they had a turbo, they've got their turbo out, they joined us on a ride, and now they're off, and that's what we like to, we're trying to help people out and guide people on where to go and what you can do. But it just, brings people together, really, in this sort of fact that we're in a sort of isolation at the moment. I think that's pretty much covered. We've got a bit of time for some Q&As. Shall I hand back to Hannah to sort of go through them?
Thanks, Andy. So we've had some questions come through for you both. First one is, if I ride a trike and I go racing, will I be lost out of the back?
No, because there'll always be slow old buggers like me who'll be even behind you. So you won't be going out the back. No, it's quite interesting watching how things pan out on Zwift, and it's very much like in the real world. I've got a good friend, John, who races every week in the Invictus races. He's quite often up at the front with the uprights. I'm usually at the back, but even though I'm at the back, I quite often beat a lot of the so-called fast riders when we're doing sprints, and even on the uphills, surprisingly. So just because you're at the back, there will be people there with you. I've met some smashing people in the last few months. I have an amazing, crazy friend called Zed from the States, another ex-serviceman, who is quite often at the back helping me along. And he got quite embarrassed when he discovered I was a 65-year-old pensioner. I didn't forget that, because he's been beasting me for weeks.
Yeah, there is. There's always something for everybody. Like I won't lie. When you do race, there is. If you get into Zwift, you will find that people like to cheat on the races. They will lower their weight categories, and and things like that, and you're just like, oh dear, really. And that's just real, it happens everywhere. But actually, that makes the rides that the trike riders might be in better, because they're less competitive, and less sort of, so you actually get a nicer atmosphere. And I mean, I've done the races are amazing as well. They are pretty realistic as well. Like, you end up having to watch for breaks and all this sort of stuff, and you sort of looking at other people's figures to see how they're going, just so you can see who's going to jump and who isn't as well. But there is something for everybody, and like Andy was saying, he's in a similar category to my daughter. Because she's very light, so she can burn up hills, but on the descent she's always going to struggle because she's so light. And Zwift takes that into account. And some of the races that she's done have been really fun, because you sort of, Jazz, you've got to get away from on the climb, because on the downhill they're going to close you down, and it's a good fun atmosphere, isn't it? And there is something for everybody. Like we said earlier, Andy's only done like 4 trike races last year, because there isn't many in the country. But you can just race and ride all day, every day on this, and there is something for everybody.
So talking about riding and racing all day, every day, someone's asked a question about whether or not you can take a break during a ride.
I guess it depends on the type of ride. If it's a banded ride, you have a problem, because if you stop pedaling, the banding breaks, and you get kicked out of that banded group. You can still ride around, but you've lost the group.
Yeah.
But on a normal ride, like the Invictus ride, that's not a problem. You can stop by the side of the road as long as you like.
A little trick there as well, which we found out about on the weekend. Oh, I will. It's good. It worked. So we did the Ride London, which involved about 11 times. Well, for me, it was 11 times up and down Box Hill. Andy, how many times do you have to do it? Was it 6?
It was 5 or 6.
5. So I mean, it's equally as hard. And the good thing about Zwift, what it does is, on the descent, if you're going really fast, and you stop pedaling, you get in the super tuck position. So if anybody's ever seen Chris Froome getting in the super tuck, you get in a super tuck position. That means you're not pedaling, which means you can get off the bike and go to the toilet or do some stretching while you're still doing 60 kilometers an hour. So that is a really good trick. If you do find yourself going down a mountain, you can get off and do some stretches, and then obviously take a break, as it were. But yeah, if you're going for a group ride, as long as it's not a banded meetup, you are safe to take a break whenever you want on a ride. Yeah. And
can you do that on races as well, or is it just rides?
I wouldn't recommend it on a race, because you'll be straight out the back door. But yeah, it's literally, there's no pressure on these things. This is what you want to put into it, isn't it? So the races are normally about 45 minutes, I would say, on average. About right, Andy, mainly.
Well, the races, yeah, and the time trials are even shorter than that.
Time trials shorter. Yeah. So
it was the Invictus one.
Yeah, so yeah, that was normally about 25, 30 minutes thereabouts, isn't it, for a sort of time trial? Yeah. So yeah, you can take a break, and in races if you want. Yeah, I mean, thing is, it's up to you what you do, and obviously, like in anything, if you were racing, I ain't taking a break, because I'm a bit competitive, so I don't want to lose. So no breaks during a race, unfortunately, for me.
Okay, and talking about races, are there any children's races available, or do they have to join an adult or women's only race?
I haven't found any children specific races yet. One thing I will mention about children on there, because you might be concerned about sort of the social communications-y side of things. Internet safety is the words we're looking for. Zwift are pretty good on that. If you're like Jasmine, my daughter, she's registered, she can ride on there. She can't receive comments on Zwift. So if someone writes something in the chat box, she can't see it, but which I think is good. Is in a way, it's a bit of a shame, because obviously she wants to be part of the chat, but obviously at the same time, it might not be appropriate conversation. It does. That's the thing about Zwift. Is good, actually. It also, you can't swear on the chat function as well. It does blank that out. But they are extra cautious about children and what they can and can't do on there. But at the moment, there is no children's races that I know of. But my daughter and my wife can happily ride in women's races in the lower ability, or men's races in the lower ability. It's all based on your watts per kilo. Although my daughter is 9, can only really is a maximum of about 100 watts she can turn out, because she only weighs about 30 kilograms. Her watts per kilo is quite good, so it's all sort of swings and roundabouts in that one. But yeah, no women's races, no children's races, but I reckon there will be soon.
Brilliant. And someone's also asked whether or not you can postpone your membership. Do you have to sign up for 12 months, or can you hold it over a certain period?
Andy, do you want that one, or do you want me to answer it?
I don't know is the honest answer. If you know, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can. So you it's essentially a pay monthly, whether you set it up like a card or direct debit. So you can freeze it. So in the early days when I used to do winter training, I would freeze it in about February time. You just have to be careful about when you pay in relation to the month. So you might have to pay out the month. But for example, I used to freeze it in about March and then start it again in October, because it's pay by month. Your account is frozen. Everything is still, all your levels and your achievements and all that sort of stuff still stands. You can just fire up the payments again and restart it. So yeah, you can freeze it on a month.
Brilliant. And then we've got one final question before we close the webinar off. And someone's asked, can you confirm if there is a limit of how many people can attend a ride?
Yes, if it's a meetup, there's a limit of 100 people. So that's the sort of ride you can set off yourself. If ever an individual gets 100 mates together on a ride, I think that's going some. But of course, the Help for Heroes ride is a meetup. It's not a regular scheduled event. But I'm not aware there is any sort of limit on a scheduled event.
No, on meetups, yeah, they did put the meetups just got what did they say, upgraded, changed, so you can have a large amount. I'm pretty sure you probably haven't you wouldn't have enough friends, I don't think, to break the meetup the boundaries on the meetup now. I think it can be quite big. TTs and things like that, if you were talking about rider limit, which is sort of in that question, some of the TTs have a limit, so you need to sign into them early. But most of the races and everything else, no limits really on that one. There is a question from Tom down the bottom, Hannah. Are you going to pick that one up, or?
Oh yeah, that one's just come through. So it says, are there any Help for Heroes partners / sponsorship companies that offer discounts to cycling, turbo and equipment? So yeah, I can answer that one. Well, actually, Andy P, you know Ice Trikes quite well, and they have offered some help and support for individuals that might need it. And obviously, you need to come through us to kind of to get hold of that. There isn't at the moment, however, we are looking into it to see if it's something that we could offer longer term. But as of yet, no. Unless, Andy, you know anyone that might be able to help with that.
Yeah, so Andy S can get the people who have got contacts. I know Andy S you got some contacts with Ice Trikes, and they're really nice to the beneficiaries, aren't they? So
yeah, Ice have said this year that because of COVID, they haven't been out to as many shows as they would have normally have done, but they did have a budget set aside for sponsorship and attending shows. And we were told about a month ago that some of that budget would be available, but providing people go through Help for Heroes. So it's not a case of going to ICE and asking direct, it's a case of going through Help for Heroes to get it.
Do you know of anyone that's got any veterans discounts, so armed forces discounts or anything like that, bike-wise?
I know that if you have a defence card, which I found out actually from my stepdad, who's ex-military, that you can use. There's a surprising amount of places you can use that, and if you float it in someone's face in a bike shop and say, "Do I get a discount?" there might be the odd 5–10% off.
Quite embarrassed if they haven't got it there formally.
Exactly, yeah. But one thing at the moment, if you're keen to get into this at the moment, turbos are quite hard to get hold of because they've just been really popular because of this lockdown situation. So have a good look around. Just be careful about buying them second hand, because they obviously can have, especially if they're smart trainers, because they can be maybe worn or misused, just like anything really, I guess. But you just have to ask at the moment. It's very early days, I guess, for Help for Heroes, Hannah, in terms of this sort of idea of virtual training, but it's definitely something that may be picking up in the future, isn't it? So
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's something that, longer term we can have a look at. But I think we've also given quite a range of options there, and we will be sending this recording out live as well via a newsletter. And on there, we together, between the three of us, have put together a PDF document which kind of outlines the different bits of kit that you will need, and also some kind of price points around that as well, which I think will be quite useful.
Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line. You could, need to take out a mortgage to get the top end of the range, because some of the prices for the turbos themselves, the power meters, are phenomenal. But you can do it probably for under 100 quid, because most people these days have a smartphone. If you've been riding a bike or a trike, you've probably already got the sensors, and you may even have a turbo. So 30 to 100 pounds could see you started.
Yeah,
plus your monthly subscription.
Yeah,
and there's no point spending more to start. You might not like it.
That's so true. Actually, my dumb turbo with a couple of sensors and my smartphone, that's it. That's all I need if I wanted to go on Zwift. I've even taken this on holiday, so it's portable, so I could put it in the car and be Zwifting somewhere else, so it's there are lots of ways of doing it. One thing we didn't talk about is you can actually do it on Watt bikes as well, so smart bikes that they have in gyms. I believe they have some of those at Tedworth House. You can even connect those ones up to Zwift if you fancy. Anything that's got sort of an Ant Plus or Bluetooth can pretty much be connected into Zwift. So I've even took my laptop into a gym that I was in a random hotel on a course and was able to connect to their exercise bike and do Zwift. So.
And it's probably worth saying, everyone's been buying turbos because it's the in thing over the summer. You can bet your bottom dollar another month down the road, the market will be flooded with second-hand, barely used turbos. People have got them out, ridden once and said, no, it's not for me.
Yeah, definitely a good tip. Look out on the Facebook Marketplace and Road Cycling, and Zwift have a site on Facebook as well where people are getting rid of stuff as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the other tip is, if you're going to buy a turbo, any turbo, go on the Zwift website. They have a list of the turbos that they have tested and would work and seem to work with Zwift. And it's probably not worth getting one that isn't on that list.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you, guys. So we're going to move to a close now. So thank you for joining us on our first ever Hot Topics webinar, and thank you to both Andys for presenting and answering all the questions this evening. If you have any further questions, you can drop us an email at sportsrecovery@helpheroes.org.uk, and that should be up on your screen now for you to note down. And as Andy said, it is also worth joining the Help Heroes Discord chat channel, even if it's just to ask questions to current Zwift riders that are, on those social rides that we're running weekly. Hopefully it's been informative, and we do hope that we will see you on some future Zwift rides. They do tend to be in an evening, and more often than not on a Thursday. So hopefully some of you will be able to join very soon. To enable us to continue developing these webinars, we would be truly grateful if you could complete the survey, which is in the Q&A link. It will also go out with the recording when we send the newsletter out in the next few days. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and have a good evening.